Okay, testing, testing. Is it working? Is it working? Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. We're very happy to have you all here. We have one of my closest and oldest friends as our featured speaker, and he is a great tower. He may be not so tall in stature, but he is a towering figure in the conservative movement. There is no question about that. We live in interesting times. The polls show that Donald Trump leads by 18% in public perception of comparing Trump and Biden on the matter of illegal immigration. 18%. That's a fact. More than one poll indicates that. But it is curious how this has come about. There's no question but that numbers of people are upset about illegal immigration. And the Democrats in the Biden administration have decided to do something about this. And so they are telling people who are greatly concerned about illegal immigration that he is at last figured out that there is something that he can do as president to solve the problem, and is promising he's going to solve the problem. That's what he tells to the vast majority of the people. On the other hand, his message to his hardcore left supporters is, don't worry, look at what I'm proposing, you can count on this. There will be now the legalization of illegal immigration to a greater extent ever than any time in the history of the country, except during my administration. I somehow think that is a difficult set of claims for him to make, and I really don't think it's going to solve his problem in the polls. I also walked in and I saw some historical posters scattered around. I want you to know that that has nothing to do with any current contest, and these are extras, I suppose, which may be of minor historical interest to anybody, but we're not taking sides in a party contest here today. I encourage you all to live tweet today's event. The hashtag is on the screen. Last year, 2023, your Leadership Institute trained more than 31,000 conservatives at more than 2,200 separate training programs. Since 1979, your Leadership Institute has trained well over 300,000 activists, students, and leaders. And you have before you our schedule for the training programs in the upcoming month. I urge you to take a moment to review these training schools and consider attending one or sending a friend to one of our trainings. If you are one of those many who are watching online, I encourage you to visit our website at leadershipinstitute.org/training to see our upcoming in-person trainings and our online trainings. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you Lizzie Elder. She will offer an invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Lizzie Elder is from Cypress, Texas. She currently attends Dallas Baptist University, where she is double majoring in political science and history. On campus, she is the chaplain of her sorority, a small group leader in the women's ministry there, and treasurer of her Student Government Association. She served as a volunteer for the Women's Auxiliary Board and many organizations that fight trafficking, such as Refuge City, and other on-campus events as needed. She's planning to start a Turning Point USA, or a political society, on campus when she returns from here, and she'll probably be the founding president. She hopes to get more students involved in politics on her very apathetic campus. She's heavily involved with the community on her campus and aims to serve her school well. In her free time, Lizzie enjoys spending time with friends, singing, and attending church. She is currently here at the Institute as our political training intern. Lizzie, would you step up, please?
This food for the nourishment of our body, Lord. May you just bless us and keep us. Shine your face upon us, Lord. Lift your countenance upon us and be gracious to us. It's in your holy name that I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Now if you would stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you, Lizzie. And now I present to you Matthew Hurt, he is going to give a programs report briefly here. Matthew is our Director of Professional Services, and there he oversees Leadership Institute's internship program, our career training, and conservativejobs.com, which is the Institute's free online job platform. Matthew joined the Institute in 2009 as a campus leadership program regional field coordinator, and he rejoined the staff full-time in 2021. He's been an indispensable member of our faculty ever since. In addition to his work at Leadership Institute, he's very engaged in grassroots organizations in Northern Virginia and across the country. Matthew, come to give up the programs report.
And if you will indulge me, I have a little bit of a lengthy report this morning. Ni hao zhao shang hao. At first, Jeff Widener was annoyed by the man entering his shot. Widener, a photographer with the Associated Press, was focusing his camera on a line of tanks in Beijing's Tiananmen Square. Click. Click. Would you click, please? Would somebody click over there? The dramatic effect here this morning. There we go. Here we go. When out of the blue came this man in a white shirt and dark trousers, carrying what appeared to be shopping bags. Widener thought the man was going to mess up the composition of his frame. Little did he know that he was about to make one of the most iconic photos in history. Before Tank Man, pro-democracy demonstrators had been occupying Tiananmen Square for weeks. It was June 5th, 1989, 35 years ago today. Pro-democracy demonstrators had been occupying Tiananmen Square for weeks. Widener had been in Beijing for a week to cover the protests, and he was hurt when the deadly crackdown began. Quote, "I was hit in the head by a protester rock in the early morning of June 4th, and I was also suffering from the flu," Widener said. So I was quite ill and injured when I photographed Tank Man from the 6th floor balcony of the Beijing hotel. The hotel had the best vantage point of the square, which was now under military control. An American exchange student, Kirk Martson, helped sneak him in. From the hotel balcony, Widener watched as the man confronted the lead tank, standing directly in front of it. The tank stopped and tried to go around the man. The man moved with the tank, blocking its path once again. At one point during the standoff, the man climbed aboard the lead tank and appeared to speak to whomever was inside. The man was eventually pulled away by onlookers. To this day, we don't know who he is or what happened to him, but he remains a powerful symbol of defiance. By this point, the Chinese government was trying desperately to control the message going out to the world. Several days before the crackdown began, China had made efforts to stop all American news outlets, including CNN, from broadcasting live in Beijing. Quote, "There was a huge risk of being arrested and having your film confiscated," Widener said. Martson, the student who helped Widener get into the Beijing hotel, put the Tank Man film in his underwear and smuggled it out of the hotel. When I was in China last year, I guarantee I didn't put any film in my underwear. The pictures were soon transmitted over Al Gore's internet telephone lines to the rest of the world. Several media outlets took a photo of Tank Man, but Widener's shot was the most used. It appeared on the front pages of newspapers all around the world, and it was nominated that year for a Pulitzer Prize. The protests in Beijing started after the death of former communist leader Hu Yaobang on April 18, 1989. Hu had worked to move China toward a more open political system, and he had become a symbol of democratic reform. Morning students marched in Tiananmen Square to call for a more democratic government. Thousands of people joined the students over the next few weeks to protest China's communist rule. A rally on May 19th drew an estimated 1.2 million people. A 33-foot tall statue, the goddess of democracy, was built in just 4 days and placed on the square. Quote, "There was a carnival atmosphere and a lightness in the air," Widener recalled. "I think most of the media was swept up in the whole affair, and I personally found it amazing that there was a statue of democracy across Chang'an Boulevard, which faced off against the giant Mao portrait symbolizing communism." Chinese troops began firing on demonstrators at about 1 a.m. on June 4th. There has never been an official death toll released. Estimates range from several hundreds to thousands. It has also been estimated that as many as 10,000 people were arrested during and after the protests. Several dozens were executed. Widener spent a week in Beijing after the crackdown began, and then he got out. To this day, his photo and everything and anything referring to the massacre are banned in China. This is actually a panned out view of the photo. Not a lot of people have seen or really recognized. This is the original Widener photo, and then this is the panned out photo. Shifting gears, on Saturday, Republicans from across Virginia gathered in Hampton to elect their party's representatives to the Republican National Committee. The RNC, which is comprised of 3 members, each from the 50 states and 6 territorial possessions, is the board of directors for the Republican Party. Morton Blackwell was first elected as Republican National Committeeman from Virginia in 1988. Since then, and in his work in the Republican Party prior to being elected to National Committeeman, Morton has committed to encouraging grassroots conservatives and Republicans to become more involved in the Republican Party. This was the first election in probably 24 years where Morton had a serious opponent. But thanks to the hard work and longtime Leadership Institute-trained activists, Morton pulled out a victory on Saturday and will continue to fight for grassroots activists like you. Morton's opponent said he was old and not cut out for the job, and the criticism surprisingly stuck among many of the convention goers. But as someone who has traveled with Morton to nearly every RNC meeting since spring of 2013, I can tell you Morton is as committed to his mission as ever. The respect he has among members of the RNC and his commitment to fighting for grassroots conservatives is truly unmatched. Congratulations, Morton. I look forward to continuing to see your work and to working alongside you as you continue at the RNC. Leadership Institute is a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit educational foundation. We do not endorse candidates, political parties, or pending legislation. And representatives and manifestations of the campaign, which you may see in this room and in the hallway, are yours to take. They are historic campaign items, and you're welcome to take them with you today. Finally, for the programs report. Despite the fact that Chris Hayes and I were traveling for half of the month of May, your careers team again graduated more than 200 students last month, continuing to average approximately 75 graduates ahead of our Leaders for America goals each month. This was accomplished through partnerships with Universidad de Navarre of Spain, and here locally with our friends at the Institute of World Politics and Catholic University of America. Students from Navarre enjoyed 2 trainings catered to them. The IWP intern class was treated to a crash course on how to make it in federal employment, and our own development team here at Leadership Institute was trained in management by Catholic University of America's Jack Yost. In addition, mainstay programs such as the DC Starter Kit delivered big attendance with great feedback. Finally, Careers continued to lay brick with its bread and butter professional development trainings. Coordinator Taylor Tade also began mentoring intern Grant Sam. As you heard, the intern program began at the middle of last month, and led the whole intern class on a hill walk to canvass conservative members of Congress for upcoming ally programs. Since the beginning of the year, your careers team has trained more than 1,076 graduates, more than double what we trained in all of 2022, and already 2/3 of the way to what we trained last year. In coordination with our employment placement efforts, the conservativejobs.com, your careers team is committed to providing training that helps conservative job seekers launch their careers in the conservative movement or land their next job. And you may see on your tables advertisement for the next careers program on Monday and Tuesday of next week, our storied Capitol Hill staff training, which has lived here at Leadership Institute since 1984. I encourage you to register. The promo code is HILL 2024, capital H, HILL 2024, for a 2-day program that will provide you lunch and training and all the networking you require, thanks to the generous support of our donors. Thank you. Oh, I forgot that photo. Thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the breakfast.
Well, thank you very much. I assure you that I did not know the topics that he was going to address outside of his job responsibilities here at the Leadership Institute. It was a surprise to me. Somehow I resisted giving him the hook during his presentation. I want to take this opportunity to thank the donors who are here. We have a lot of donors to the Leadership Institute who come to our events and participate. The news is the Leadership Institute continues to do extraordinarily well. We are still in the period of truly exceptional growth. 2020, we set a record of 23 million annual revenue. The next year, 30 million. The next year, 39 million. Last year, 42 million. And we are running this year considerably ahead of our pace. Last year, we could not do what we do without the support of our generous donors. And now to introduce our speaker, Lee Edwards, I'm gonna ask Zach Ramsey to stand up here. I just have to say, it's no exaggeration, Lee is one of my oldest and dearest friends. I've known him longer than anybody else in this room. When I was in DC in the latter half of the 60s training college Republicans, Lee often came and gave lectures on communications, and I was able to be of assistance because Lee was the premier organizer of major conservative events in the DC area for years and years, so much so, and I don't know if this is in the planned introduction for him, but at one point the New York Times referred to Lee Edwards as the voice of the silent majority. To introduce Lee, Zach Ramsey will step up here, please. He is from Kerrville, Texas. He's currently a senior at George Washington University. He's pursuing a double major in political science and international affairs with a minor in public policy and a concentration in security policy. He's worked for multiple political campaigns, including Youngkin for governor, and the 2020 Georgia state runoff elections for Loeffler and Perdue. He has also completed 2 legislative congressional internships for Representative Brian Mast and Congressman Michael Cloud. Zach's major area of interest is Iranian nuclear policy, and he has interned for APAC and for NCRI. After graduation, Zach plans to pursue a master's in security policy while working in the field. In his free time, Zach enjoys traveling to and hiking at national parks. He enjoys rowing and woodworking. And currently, Zach is our Advanced School of Politics intern. Zach, come up and introduce our speaker, please.
Dr. Lee Edwards is the founding chairman of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation and recipient of its Truman-Reagan Medal of Freedom. He is an adjunct professor of politics, emeritus, and former distinguished lecturer at the Catholic University of America. He was also a distinguished fellow in conservative thought for 20 years at the Heritage Foundation. He has published 25 books about American conservatism, including biographies of Ronald Reagan, Barry Goldwater, William F. Buckley, and a history of the conservative movement. His most recent book is a memoir, Just Right, A Life in Pursuit of Liberty, in 2017. His books about world politics include The Collapse of Communism and A Brief History of the Cold War. His work has been translated into Chinese, Japanese, French, Hungarian, Polish, and Swedish. His many honors and awards include the Order of the Merit of the Republic of Hungary, the Friendship Medal of Diplomacy from the Republic of China, Taiwan, the Legend of Yeah from Young Americans Foundation, and the Walter Judd Freedom Award. He was a fellow at the Institute of Politics at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University, and a founding director of the Institute of Political Journalism at Georgetown University. He received a PhD in world politics from Catholic University and a doctorate of humane letters from Grove City College. He did graduate work at Sorbonne and holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in English from Duke University. Dr. Edwards lives in Arlington, Virginia, and attends St. Rita Catholic Parish in Alexandria, Virginia. Please hold all questions until a microphone is brought to you. Thank you.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I sleep better at night knowing that Morton Blackwell is the national committeeman from Virginia. And actually, I'm not sure whether he gets any sleep at all the way that he works for our cause, for what we believe in here, the principles of our republic. I want you to imagine with me a world, an America, without the Heritage Foundation, without the Cato Institute, without National Review, without the Leadership Institute, without Fox News, without some 65 state think tanks going across our country from coast to coast. A bunch of Nobel laureates, best-selling novels and articles. And yet that was America. That was the United States in 1955. Without any of those. What was there in the movement? Well, the movement had a few scattered intellectuals in outposts around the country. Had, for example, Milton Friedman at the University of Chicago, Russell Kirk at Michigan State, Ludwig von Mises doing one class a week at New York University. You had a few regional correspondents and journalists. And that was about it. We were a wasteland, literally a wasteland, with all of these scattered outposts, but no connection. That was the state of affairs in 1955. And yet only one decade, or a little bit more than that, later, there was a heritage. There was a Cato Institute. There was a National Review. There was a Fox News. There were state think tanks from coast to coast. Why? How did this come about? Was it luck? Was it merely it was a political pendulum which was operating in America, and it would swing to the left, and then it would swing to the right, and somehow conservatives came along at the right time? Maybe it was Providence. Well, I believe in Providence, but I also believe in free will. In free will. And I would submit to you that what happened was that over the period of the next 20 or so years, 5 distinct groups of people came along and created and developed and dug deep to bring about a conservative movement. I call them the 5 Ps. The 5 Ps, because I like alliteration. And the first group of Ps were the philosophers. They laid an intellectual foundation, deep and true, that made it possible for those to come along afterwards. And one could talk about a couple of different ones, but I'm going to mention 3 in particular. Friedrich Hayek and the Road to Serfdom. How many of you have read The Road to Serfdom? Well, I know that there are many of our younger attendees here who did and have read it. Because Friedrich Hayek in The Road to Serfdom, way back in 1944-45, wrote a seminal work in which he said that if we want to have prosperity, if we want to have freedom, we must look at the role of the individual and turn away from any possibility of listening to what government has in store for us, because government takes away particularly our freedoms. And nobody had ever written such a book before. And it was established, it was the first plank, if you will, of the conservative platform. A libertarian one. And next came along a book called Witness by Whittaker Chambers, a couple of years later. Whittaker Chambers, who was Whittaker Chambers? Bill Buckley called him the most important defector from communism in the 20th century. That in this extraordinary work of his called Witness, he explained why he had become a communist and then why he became an ex-communist. And if you do nothing else but read the first chapter of Witness by Whittaker Chambers, and you will see therein why he became that ex-communist. And what was important about that was that he represented the anti-communist strain of conservatism at that period of time. And it was the anti-communists who brought together the traditionalist conservatives and the libertarian conservatives, establishing, as I say, that firm foundation, intellectual foundation for our movement. First the philosophers, then what could be called the popularizers, men of communications, men and women who could take a look at an issue, a complex issue, and break it down, transferring it from arcane language into understandable, everyday American language. And who were some of the great popularizers who came along? Bill Buckley, who founded National Review in 1955. Rush Limbaugh, the great talkmeister, who came along with maybe 15 to 20 million listeners every week. And we miss him badly. But fortunately, we do have younger and young communicators like Ben Shapiro and others who are carrying on the message and popularizing those basic ideas which came out of our Western civilization and the Republic. First the philosophers, then the popularizers, and then who? Well, a group that you all know a good deal about. The politicians. And the politicians read about these conservative ideas in newspaper articles and heard lectures given and saw them on television and said, you know, I can do something with those ideas. I can create policies, public policies out of those ideas of like limited government and free enterprise and traditional American values and individual freedom and responsibility and a strong national defense. Those 5 ideas, ladies and gentlemen, make up the most basic elements of our movement. And it was the popularizers who took those arcane ideas, somewhat arcane ideas, and transmitted them into public policies and into campaigns on which they ran and won. I like to look at it this way. You might think of it in terms of misters. You had Mr. Republican way back in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, Robert Taft. Mr. Republican, then followed by Mr. Conservative, Barry Goldwater, who ran for president, didn't quite make it. Not quite. Can't be wrong. Mr. President, Ronald Reagan, and Mr. Speaker, but the original speaker, Newt Gingrich. Now, I know Newt can be somewhat controversial. He was not a perfect politician by any means. If there is such a thing as a perfect politician, I don't know, maybe Reagan might come as close to it as anybody. But Newt Gingrich really accomplished what people thought at the time was a miracle. That after 40 years of having no power in the Congress, he came up with a way to campaign on a contract with America and win a majority of the House for the first time in 40 years. Philosophers, popularizers, politicians, but we can't leave out another group, the next group that sort of came along, but was always there, as a matter of fact, during all of this. The philanthropists. Don't ask me how to spell it. I always get those P's and H's mixed up. But certain philanthropists, men of vision, men of means, said, well, this actor, Ronald Reagan, wants to run for, or we want him to run for governor of California. But Mr. Reagan told these philanthropists like Henry Salvatore out there in California, I can't run unless I get some help. I got to know a little bit more about what is important to the people of California. What are the problems? What are the solutions? Will you all underwrite my sort of testing the waters? And Henry Salvatore wrote a check, and a few other people did as well. Mr. Reagan decided to run. And as a matter of fact, my wife Ann and I, she was my helpmate for 57 years till we lost her a year and a half ago. We were out in California traveling with Reagan in late 1963 as he determined and tested the waters. And we had the opportunity, and for those of you in politics directly will appreciate this, we traveled around with Mr. Reagan, the four of us, my wife and I, Mr. Reagan and his driver. That was the advanced team, guys. That was it. Can you believe it? Wow. So at the end of 2 days of campaigning with Ronald Reagan, he said, well, come on up to the house and have some iced tea and cookies, and we've been working hard here, and let's sit around and relax. So we went up there in the hills, Holmby Hills, sat down. He put us in the library, which was about the size of this platform. It's tiny. But one whole wall was filled with books. Wait a minute now, I thought Ronald Reagan was just some kind of puppet dangling on the strings of some giant marionette. You mean he actually read these books? And I said, what kind of books were they? And I got up close to them. And they were history and economics, about America, about the West, about the future. And there before me were books like Witness by Whittaker Chambers, Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt, and a book I had not read, The Law by Frederick Bastiat. Who the heck was Henry? I didn't know who Mr. Bastiat was. I hadn't read it, but Ronald Reagan had. He was a 19th century free market economist, very influential on many of our libertarian friends here in America. So thanks to Henry Salvatore, Ronald Reagan decided to run for governor of California and did sort of go on from there with some success. Not one, but two landslides as president of these United States. Or take Joseph Coors. It's a bit early, but I was looking around for the Coors beer, Morton, but I didn't see it. But okay. Okay. Thank heavens. I feel better knowing that. And Mr. Coors came to Washington, D.C. back in 1973 and wanted to get more involved in politics, public affairs, and was visiting with various groups of people where he should make his investment. A couple $100,000, he said. And he met up with these two young men, Paul Weyrich and Ed Fulner. Weyrich working for Senator Allott and Ed Fulner working for Phil Crane. And they made a pitch to him. He said, well, support us. We've got this idea for a think tank. One which delivers research to members of Congress and members of the administration on time and in language that's understandable and consistent. And he could have put money in American Enterprise Institute and a couple of others which were around at the time, but chose instead to invest in this idea of these two young men from Capitol Hill. Years later, when I wrote a history of the Heritage Foundation, I said to Mr. Coors, why did you take a gamble on these two unknown staffers on Capitol Hill? Why? He said, two reasons. He said, number one, they showed me a business plan and how much is going to be spent in this budget on communications, how much on rent, how much on travel, how much on publications. And as a businessman, I was impressed by two young men submitting a business plan to me. And I said, well, was that all, Mr. Coors? He said, no, there's one more thing. They wanted to make a difference right away. Now, not tomorrow. And I like that. I like the action of that proposal. And so Mr. Coors came up with $200,000, invested it, gave it to these two young men. Coming out of that was the Heritage Foundation. But if it had not been for the vision of people like Henry Salvatore, Joseph Coors, and others at that early days, we would not have the conservative movement we have today. The fifth P, and this may surprise you, poets. That's right, I said poets. Poets can say things that the most brilliant nonfiction writers cannot say, can engage people, can reach out to people with language, with ideas, with their voice, with their way of telling a story that nonfiction people can. Well, what am I talking about? Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand was a poet in the largest sense of the word. Tom Wolfe, The Bonfire of the Vanities. Robert Frost. Go read your Robert Frost, a wonderful poet. And he was a conservative. And you'll see conservative themes coming out of his poems. C.S. Lewis. I'm sure if I ask you to raise your hands, a number of you have read C.S. Lewis. Well, it may be you've read the Chronicles of Narnia. Maybe you've read his 3-volume science fiction, Perelandra, That Hideous Strength. And of course, that great best-selling popular trilogy of films, The Lord of the Rings, which is really a story of good versus evil, as basic as you can get, with, of course, the conservatives on the right side. So I would suggest to you that with such predecessors, we stand on pretty firm ground. How fortunate we are, how blessed we are to be able to say that, starting with the philosophers and then the popularizers, then the politicians, and always the philanthropists there willing to write a check. We're in pretty good shape. Now, which is not to say that we don't need people to come along like you all, of a younger generation particularly, with your ideas of applications of conservative principles, of getting involved in political action, of going out and raising funds or making money. That's okay too. How fortunate we are to have those 5 Ps. Because of them, conservatives live and work on a foundation that is sound, is solid. It's not going away. And maybe occasionally we get a little frustrated with things that happen. Maybe the person whom we hope would win did not win. But please, please take consolation in knowing with the foundation that we have, we can overcome any challenge. And I think we are. That's why I'm so proud to be here with you this morning, to say a few words about the conservative movement, to say a few words about my good friend, Morton Blackwell, who enables me to have a good night's sleep these days. I want to take off my hat. It's over there. Take off my hat and salute you, Morton, for what you've done for the movement. We wouldn't be the movement we are without you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. God bless you all. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say just 1 or 2 words about the victims of communism. I'm as proud as I am of anything in my life, having been a co-founder of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. And you mentioned Tank Man. We have the museum, which you must come to our museum at 915th Street, McPherson Square, a block and a half from the White House. And we have at the museum, not on display this month, but we do have it, a statue of Tank Man. We have it. Not only that of the victims of communism in Tiananmen Square, the goddess of democracy, but the Tank Man is an extraordinary sight. So please, Morton, if you could ask one of your guys to get in touch with us, we'll set up a special tour for you on that. There's so much to be said. I'll just say that I mentioned that there is nothing more important than I've done in my life, and I've been blessed to have had an opportunity to do some pretty extraordinary things, not because of me, but because of the cause, because of the ideas for which we're working. Nothing more important than getting the museum to the victims of communism started. So come on by, visit us, and we'll take good care of you.
I'm sure there are people who want to take this opportunity to ask you a question or two, Lee. So let's see, raise your hands, wait until you're given the microphone before you speak. Barbara, you need water?
Thank you. Barbara Bowie Whitman, and I'm glad you wound up with your pitch for your museum, and Victims of Communism. I'm afraid that ever since the Berlin Wall fell, too many of us have thought that that war was over, and it will be with us beyond my lifespan. But one of the things that concerns me is that some of those concepts work their way into what pretends to be Republican thought. And there's a phrase in something called the Virginia Republican Creed that uses the words economic justice as something that you can achieve through the free market system. I don't believe economic justice is a conservative concept. Do you?
No, I don't. I would much prefer to use a phrase like free enterprise, individual freedom and responsibility. You know, I use that phrase, individual freedom and responsibility. I got that from Milton Friedman, one of the great libertarian philosophers of the 20th century. And what he said was, yes, freedom is important. It is even all important. But what is also important is what you do with that freedom. What do you do with it? Not just to be concerned only with yourself, but to be concerned with the greater good. And that was Milton Friedman.
Thank you, Lee. As an eminent historian, philosopher, Renaissance man that you are, I'm going to ask you to look into a crystal ball for a moment and give us your perspectives on what you think is going to happen in the next 6 months in the United States.
You know, when I look at where we are today, compared with the wasteland when we started out, I know that anything is possible. Do you know why I think it's possible? Because I can look out at you all, and you're going to make the difference. I can predict based upon looking in your faces, knowing your background, knowing your commitment, knowing above organizations like Leadership Institute, that anything is possible. Anything is possible if you're doing it on the basis of certain ideas, certain principles that are at the root of Western civilization and our wonderful, glorious republic. It is possible. So believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. Read those books. Take your inspiration from those politicians. Be a popularizer. There is so much to be done. And even Morton Blackwell can't do it all by himself. He needs help.
Lee, there were two people that you didn't mention. One was Henry Reagan, before 1955, and the other was your father. And I was wondering if you had any special memory about your dad.
Well, my father was a reporter for the Chicago Tribune, starting in the 1930s through the 1970s, for about 40 years. And he imparted to me his belief in an honest and open journalism. I don't think he'd be very happy about what has happened to journalism today, but that's where it was back when he was practicing his craft. He was important in my own upbringing because he was a close associate of a gentleman named Joseph McCarthy, who was a great anti-communist in the day, and who was right he was vilified at the time by saying that he exaggerated the number of communists in our government. Actually, Joseph McCarthy underestimated the number, and M. Stanton Evans, another great conservative, wrote a book called Blacklisted by History, in which he absolutely showed through the use of government files that there were hundreds and hundreds of communists who had infiltrated our government in the 1920s and 30s and 40s. And it was Joe McCarthy, among others, who rooted them out. And for that, of course, we owe him a great deal of gratitude. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, and thank you, Mr. Blackwell. I appreciate being here. As a product of Margaret Thatcher bioconservatism and being here now in the United States running for Congress in Washington, D.C., with you being the voice of the silent majority, what advice would you give someone as humble as myself?
Well, I would go back to those 5 ideas that I mentioned, which are the 5 ideas which really motivated the Heritage Foundation, I think, in the movement. The idea of limited constitutional government, free enterprise, individual freedom and responsibility, traditional American values based upon our Judeo-Christian heritage, and finally, a strong national defense, or what Ronald Reagan called peace through strength. Those 5 ideas, I think, should be sufficient to carry us forward, to bring about victories, and hopefully to bring about some majorities this November. Oops, is that a partisan political comment? That was a miss. I just stumbled there a little bit.
One more question.
One more question. Pressure's on in the back.
I'm coming.
Yep.
I was listening, and you kind of talked about taking a vision and putting it into action and achieving your goal, and that an important piece is persuasive language and creating an image or enthusiasm for that idea. With that in mind, isn't there an argument to be made that conservatives, along with opposing Biden's immigration policy, still should find a way to reach out in kindness to the men and women and children trapped in this mess? I think it's the right thing to do personally, but I also think in terms of the image of who conservatives are, you don't want, if you reach out in kindness, maybe they won't all become Democrats. Thank you.
One can only hope and pray. No, but I think that it is characteristic of conservatives that we would listen to you make the argument that we should do more than just, talk about throwing them in jail and dumping them in the Rio Grande and so forth. I think that we are not so arrogant as to believe that we always have the exact right answer for every possible problem, that we're willing to listen, willing to debate, willing to discuss, willing to search for the golden mean, for that golden mean between doing nothing and doing too much. So thank you for being so eloquent yourself and in challenging those of us here who might have a different point of view. Isn't that coming out of that hopefully would be a better answer? Thank you.
Thank you. Lee, thank you so much. You've been so important to me, so important to the movement. Much appreciate your coming by, and as a token of our appreciation, allow me to present to you an Adam Smith tie. It's been around a long time. You didn't mention Adam Smith, but he certainly is one of the key elements that gives us liberty and conservative principles. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, as you might be able to tell by the decor here in this room and the flyers that were placed in front of you at your tables, we're getting ready for the 51st annual National 4th of July Conservative Soiree, and the first of these soirees was organized by 3 people, all close and dear friends of mine, and one of those organizers was Lee Edwards. So you've been so valuable to us. This is a free event and highly anticipated on the conservative calendar. So if you are interested in sponsoring the event on the behalf of an organization or as an individual sponsor, please contact my events coordinator, KJ Lynham. KJ, are you here to raise your hand? She's out organizing something. You can visit leadershipinstitute.org/soiree. As is typical every July, we will not host a Wednesday Wake-Up Club breakfast on the first Wednesday because we're in preparation for the 4th of July event. So instead, would you join us on August 7th for our next monthly Wednesday Wake-Up Club breakfast? I encourage you to RSVP online at leadershipinstitute.org/breakfast. And we wish a Father's Day, a happy Father's Day to all fathers here and fathers of those who are here. Our Adam Smith ties and cufflinks make a great Father's Day gift. And so my intern, Nicholas Pruitt. Nicholas, are you here to step forward? He's outside organizing things. Well, anyhow, Nicholas Pruitt is here, and he'll be standing near the elevator ready to sell you Adam Smith attire, which is suitable for Father's Day gifts. Kevin Tover and Spencer Johnson, will you please step up here? I can. Okay, we got one of you. I'm not doing too well calling staffers out of the crowd this morning. But if you are interested this morning in a tour of our Stephen P.J. Wood building here and our Emerson and Dolores Reinsch Center for Campus Reform, which is adjacent to and accessed internally without going on the street, this gentleman will lead this tour and give you a great tour of the Leadership Institute, where we have acquired, in addition to the 2nd floor of the office building next door, we have now the 7th floor of the office building next door, each of them 10,000 square feet added on to this 38,000 square foot building here. But we would be delighted to have you go by and the building here and tour the 2nd floor next door. You'll find, if you haven't seen it before, it's something worth seeing. We're renovating now the 7th floor, so we're not going to take the tour up there. So if you have questions, ask them, and if your tour guide can't come up with the answers, you all can walk by my office and I'll do the best that I can to answer them myself. So thank you again, everyone, for your attendance and for your continued support. Thank you. Good morning.